think number one, to be at a premier program in college football. I think the way the game's gone and the way this place has been for decades and decades, that's obviously attractive. But the second reason, maybe even a bigger part of it, is getting back to my roots. I'm an O-line guy. Being a coordinator for the last 3 years, that's where my eyes go, and to be able to coach a position like that's my roots at a place like this, that was all attractive. Coach Day's vision for the program, all those things align with what I want.
Obviously, it's been a little while since you coached specifically offensive line, have coached tight ends in the meantime, which, it's a lot of walking that too. But what's different about specifically coaching and having your focus on the
Yeah, I think number one, right, at any point in time, that group has the largest percentage of a position group on the offensive side of the ball. So you're talking about 5 guys playing as one. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to create the brotherhood. And I think that's what's unique about the position, is what's fun about it, right? It is a unique brotherhood that you get in that O-line room, and certainly something we're going to try to foster here.
How much were you aware of just watching this team, kind of what they went through last year? I know it was talked about a lot during the playoff run of rotating guys and injuries and whatnot. How much did that maybe give you a head start just from seeing them on TV and whatnot?
Certainly from afar, I'm aware of what's going on nationally. When you're in your own season, you're in the weeds of that season. Sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees, but being here the last 3.5, 4 weeks, whatever it's been, and diving into the cut-ups and seeing how many different guys came in and played integral roles on the way to the championship, I think it's a very unique situation. You got a lot of guys, particularly on the interior, that have played a lot of football, rotated through, so that should help us as we go into spring.
Coach Day was talking about Brian being a first-time play caller. You've obviously done that. You'll have your offensive line you're worried about, but how much can you help him as he kind of goes through this process for the first time?
Well, Hart's been great. As organized as anyone I've ever been around, sharp football mind in every area of it. I think the biggest thing you learn as a coordinator, and me doing that job for the last 3 years, you learn how to be a really good assistant coach. And I think that's my number one job for Coach Hartline, is to be the best assistant coach I can be. Whatever his vision is for the offense, to be able to go out and make sure that those 5 guys can execute that vision. And that's what you learn being a coordinator. Everyone's got a role. We've all got a job to do, to be able to go out and do that job at a high level, to go with the collective vision of what our offense is trying to do.
What are the first steps you have to take as a coach? You come in, I'm sure you have them, but you didn't recruit these guys. You didn't bring them in out of the portal. How do you kind of get to know them, and what do you do to get to start that process?
Well, I think that's you mentioned it. That's the most important thing, is to try to build trust with a group, and you've got to do it in a short amount of time. And trust, it's not easy to build. It's very easy to lose. So the first thing that I tried to attack here, before you even get into the X's and O's and talking about inside zone and gap schemes and all the things that go into it, 6-man protection, is I wanted to meet with each player individually and get an idea of their story. I didn't recruit them. I have not been with them day to day for however long they've been in this program. So to be able to sit down with them and have anywhere between a 20 to 45-minute meeting, that's how I started the job here, with each individual guy on the offensive line, to hear their story, where they've come from, their background, all those things, to try to bridge that process, and also give them a piece of myself, my family, my track record, where I've been, my path to get here, my path as a player, all those little things, because you're trying to build that trust in a short amount of time, and that's where it starts, right? It starts with the person. At the end of the day, the football is the football. This is a people business, right? You've got to, our job is to motivate, direct, coach, develop people, right? So the first thing to me is attacking that individually, and us getting on the same page and getting an idea of each other's background. So we tried to do that, and then obviously we've dove into the football piece, as we're getting closer to spring ball and having those meetings and that shared brotherhood and all those things. I can't wait to get my family up here and get them around the guys, because I think that brotherhood's important.
You've been known as a good recruiter throughout your entire career, but have you seen a shift in the way that you're able to do things already without walking into buildings yet? When you say, like, Tyler Bowen, Ohio State, offensive coordinator, whatever you say, like, is it different than what you were able to do already at Virginia Tech or even at Penn State?
I always look at this with recruiting. I think it's so true. Every program, there's a different level of difficulty. Right, it's all difficult however you do. Now, I think the biggest transition is going from a role as a coordinator back to the role as a position coach in that recruiting mode, which was obviously been something that I've been excited about, to be honest. That's something that I cut my teeth doing. But I think each program you go to, it's a different level of difficulty based on who you're competing against, right? When you're at certain programs, you're not going to compete against a program like this, right? But when you're at this program, you compete nationally with other programs, right? So it's all the same level of difficulty, and I still, it goes back to kind of what we talked about with the trust with the offensive line. Like, it is a people business, and the first thing, and no different than we did with our individual players, but with the recruits that have been on Ohio State's radar for a while and our radar for a while, but also new ones, is try to build that relationship and bridge it quickly. Make sure that we're getting people on campus to be able to sit down face to face. I haven't had an opportunity with a ton of these guys to go visit them in person unless they were regionally at the place I was. So, I think all of that's been exciting. I don't know if it's certainly the brand here is really, really strong, right? But I always look at it, I'll never say it's easier or better, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just a different level of difficulty, and you've got to attack it that way.
We talked to Bashal last week at the Combine about, he said that you do a good job of putting running backs and the run game in the best position to be successful. Do you have like a run game that you try to stick to, or are you like a chameleon when you call run games? You get into spring practice, you're going to see like, okay, this group does this best, or is there like a Tyler Bowen staple of what you want a run game to be?
Right. I think the first thing that you mentioned, Bashaw is an incredible player, and it was fun to be able to move him around and put him in positions to be successful. Hard worker, unbelievable. I'm looking forward to see what he does with his career. I look at the run game like this, particularly this time of the year. In today's college game, to play and particularly run the ball at a high level, you better have a diverse scheme, right? So that's going to look very multiple at this time of the year. And then as we go, we're funneling that down to what does this team do well? What does this offensive unit do well in the run game? And I think you're always looking at it that way. If you don't have the ability to attack the defense from the A gap to the D gap and on the perimeter, at some point, they're going to be able to hunker in and have an opportunity to make it difficult for you. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but they can make it difficult. So to be able to have that diversity to go in schematically, and then from there, what do we do well? What do those five guys do well? What do our running backs see well? Where's our quarterback involvement in it? All those things play into the run game. So I wouldn't say there's ever one thing. I know this: we want to have a physical downhill run game that does not generate TFLs and havoc, right? That's the number one thing, right? We're doing our best all the time to not create TFLs and havoc. So it really starts there, right? Before you go run the ball really well, you can't give up TFLs, right? We got to keep the ball moving forward. So I look at it that way every year. Every team's different. Every unit takes on a different identity, but you've got to start diverse enough to attack the defense in every area, and then figure out what pieces in that game plan week really fit to go against that defense based on what we do well.
Who have been which coaches think you've taken the most from or been most influenced by when it comes to how you think about the run game?
Oh man, there's a ton. I'll miss somebody if I just start spitting off names. I mean, I'll go all the way back. I think early in my career, I was fortunate to play for a really good head coach that was run-minded and very diverse in what we did, and then also become a young coach in my first job, and that would be Ralph Friedgen. That someone comes to mind right away. But then even moving on, the spread game with Coach Moorhead, where I was with him in a couple different places and running that type of system. Invaluable, the experience I had with the Jacksonville Jaguars, with what we did. Wasn't a great year from a result standpoint, but you take a lot of knowledge from that situation. And then, going to a place like I just came from, where you're in a rebuild and you're having to evolve every year. Your personnel may not be necessarily to go equate, but we've got to figure out how to equate the talent and equate the run game based on what we have. So I think all of those have been valuable experience. I don't know if there's, I don't know if there's one person in particular. I would say you take good and bad from everywhere you go, and I'm not trying to give a cop-out answer, but that's the truth. If nothing else, I don't believe you can be in this profession and not be a lifelong learner, and that's how I view it. Every year, if we're not studying best practices of technique, if we're not studying best practices of what's new schematically, if we're not looking at our own film and saying, how could we make this better, how can we enhance it, then we're going to fall behind.
Tyler, I'm interested from a recruiting standpoint. You spend a lot of time getting to know kids, and then you take a job, right? You have to switch.
Right.
How does the messaging shift when you go from any place, obviously from Virginia Tech to Ohio State? You're recruiting a lot of the same kids.
Right.
How does the message change? Is it just, man, I didn't understand Ohio State's different because of this, or is it just still about the personal relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with the personal relationship for sure. You know, there's a trust level that's built in any relationship we have, but it's also kind of bridging the gap of what this program means. You know, and I think it's a good testimony for guys that I had prior relationships with on, you know, why did I want to come here? You know, why did I want to be a part of this? What I think is the best program in college football. So I think that part of it makes the communication easy, but it still starts with those personal relationships. Those don't go away.
Has there been a wow moment for you in the month you've been here of maybe realizing like this is why a place like Ohio State is at the top of the heap?
I wouldn't say a wow. It is what I expected it to be, but more. And I'd say that all starts with Coach Day's vision, just how the program is ran day to day, the detail, the organization, how everyone has a very detailed role of what they need to accomplish for the greater good. And I think that's, from a player standpoint, from a coach standpoint, I think that's very unique, and he's at the top of the heap with that.
You guys haven't been.
Excuse me, sorry.
When Ryan Day first contacted you, the number popped up on the phone. That's how it happened. Would you think? How'd that process start?
Well, obviously, you know what's going on in the landscape of coaching. You know, I think it was a time, if I'm remembering correctly, it's all been a whirlwind. We were out on the road, or I was on the road, and number popped up, and it was great because I'd been around Coach Day before when I was down in Jacksonville, and knew a couple people here, and obviously have always competing against this program and also admiring it from afar. Was very excited, and then the conversation started from there in the interview process.
And you were talking about that. Why leave? For obvious reasons.
Yeah, I think you think about alignment with the type of coaches you want to be around, the type of head coach you want to work for, the ability to compete at the highest level. I think all of those things attracted me here.
When you get here, you have to evaluate the guys that are already here, the returning starters you have. That you guys haven't been in a practice yet, but what are your early impressions of like Carson at center and the guards that you guys are bringing back, and then the tackles? Like, you didn't recruit these guys, you didn't maybe not met any of them until now. What are your early impressions of like the stock that you have in the room right now?
Right. You said it best first. I'm going to reserve a lot until we get on the field. Obviously, there's a body of work with some guys from last year that you're seeing on film, watching every snap that they went through last year, and guys moving around and all those things. I'd say the thing that stands out to me is the athleticism in the room. That we got guys that can pull and kick out and get on the perimeter and do things. I think there's a general level of athleticism that sticks out, and guys that have experienced different spots. So you hope as we get into spring, that, and hope's a bad strategy, but as we go through spring, we're able to create some flexibility up front.
When you had your conversations with Ryan about this job, how big a part of those conversations was the recruiting aspect of this, and how much did that matter, do you think, in your hiring process?
I don't know. That'd be a question for him. I mean, I hope that everywhere I've been, I think you make an impression on people as a recruiter, as a coach. I always view it, whatever job you're at, you're interviewing every day, not even just for that job, but what your reputation is. So I hope that played a part of it, but not sure. I'm just here to work. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.